The most important thing for me personally is making sure people understand that these vaccines were developed safely, that they are over 90% effective, and that it's a way that we can ultimately end this pandemic, but it doesn't matter if people won't get the vaccination.
The Surgeon General this morning appearing to have a legitimate concern. The vaccine obviously will only work if at least roughly 3/4 of the population gets the shots. Recent poll from Gallup shows that fewer than 6 in 10 Americans now say they trust the COVID vaccine enough to take them. A couple of other new polls that survey specific populations even more daunting. Only 45% of New York City firefighters polled by the union say they'd take the vaccine. A Pew Research surveyed African Americans, and just 42% of them say they will get inoculated. Another huge challenge is distributing the vaccine, and Joe Biden says the Trump administration has no plan to deal with it.
They've clued us in on their planning on how they plan to distribute the actual vaccine to the various states. But there is no detailed plan, that we've seen anyway, as to how you get the vaccine out of a container into an injection syringe into somebody's arm.
Now, in addition to the questions about the plan, there also seems to be little to no cash. State officials, they say they need help in a major way from D.C. to fund this massive effort, but so far very little is trickling in. Operation Warp Speed has reportedly spent roughly $10 billion plus here to support the development, but the states have only got a fraction of that to help get the shots into people's arms. And then you get to the issue of supply. The government originally promised that hundreds of millions of doses would be ready by the end of the year. Now, it's looking like 35 to 40 million shots at most will be available, and since it's a two-shot treatment, that translates roughly to 20 million people tops will be inoculated this month. That is if things go as planned. Well, my next guest, he has been writing quite a bit about the race for the vaccine. New York Times columnist Carl Zimmer is kind enough to join us now. And Carl, let's first start off with the what, which is the vaccines themselves and the planning that goes involved. I think everybody remembers what went on. We were talking about ventilators, where it was almost every man for themselves when it related to the states. How coordinated is this, and how much is the CDC taking point on this, or are states really kind of trying to figure this all out on their own?
Well, the CDC is coordinating with the states, but it is up to the states themselves to come up with a plan and then to provide to the CDC. And we've seen a variety of different plans that people are coming up with in different states. And as you mentioned, there are challenges. There may be some states that will be okay in terms of smooth distribution, where the others may need funds to help them to get them to everyone who needs it.
And then not all vaccines created equal. I'm not even talking about efficacy, but I'm also talking about some need to be stored at different temperatures than others. And I would think states have different wherewithals for this. Is the plan designed in such a way that, you know, one will get Moderna, one will get Pfizer, depending on their capacities and their storage requirements? Or is a lot of that being figured out on the fly?
Well, there are plans that are being made. They're taking into account the fact that these vaccines have different storage requirements. But on the other hand, it is important to bear in mind that Pfizer, for example, which has a vaccine that has to be kept at negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit, is actually building boxes with dry ice in them and with thermometers in them, so that they're sort of self-contained. They can be transported and moved and then actually stored in this way. So, it's not like people are not aware of these challenges and doing everything they can to meet them.
How about the WHO in terms of the prioritization as to who this vaccine will be made available first to? We've all talked about people on the front lines and then the nursing homes, but then after that, Carl, there seems to be a debate as to, prioritize age, or maybe you should prioritize people that come into more direct contact, front-facing, whether it be people at supermarkets or people, police or fire. How does that get figured out as to who gets it and when?
Well, the Center for Disease Control has a committee of expert advisors who goes very carefully through materials for every vaccine that the FDA licenses. And then they make the decisions about how to recommend how to give these vaccines out. This is definitely a challenge they have not met before in terms of the scale of it. So it's going to be a lot of work for them to go through these questions that you're talking about. But they have a lot of experience with that, with other vaccines, and they have been meeting for months talking about these very issues.
Carl, in terms of not just who it's made available to, but who has to take it. I know there's not going to be a federal mandate, but then you get into this area about which industries can require employees, or if, let's say you're an airline, can you require passengers to have proof of vaccination before they board a plane? Is this going to be settled in the courts, or is this going to be a discretionary decision made by private companies or by institutions?
Well, you bear in mind, for example, that kids go to school, like they have to be vaccinated. That is just an agreement they have to make, the parents have to make if they want their kids in school. So we have dealt with this kind of issue before. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody who doesn't want to be required to take a vaccine for work brings a court case, and we'll have to see how the courts sort that out. But as you say, this is not something that is being approached as by the government as something that should be mandatory. But I think what's important for the government to stress is that this is a good thing. People should want to take this. If the FDA comes forward and says, we've looked at this evidence, this is a safe vaccine, and this is a very effective vaccine, and this is how we're going to get out of this pandemic, everybody should want to take this vaccine.
This is strictly a guess, Carl, but I know three recent former presidents, Clinton, Obama, and Bush, have said that they're not only willing to take the vaccine when made available, but to do so on live TV. To me, I'd be very curious the impact of what Trump will say, since he's championing the vaccine and its importance. Would he be willing to do the same? And if he wouldn't, and he championed the skeptics, whether they be the anti-vaxxers or people who just refuse on principle, what the impact of that would be. And I mentioned coming into this that we need roughly 3 in 4 Americans to take this so that we can get to herd immunity.
Yeah, well, President Trump definitely has made it clear that he sees the vaccine project as part of his legacy as a president. And tomorrow he is actually having a big summit at the White House to celebrate the achievement of these drug companies. So if he wants to cement that legacy, it certainly wouldn't hurt for him to be part of this effort to model behavior, to say, I trust this vaccine is important, I'm going to get this vaccine too.
Let's do this half full, Carl, and say, okay, whether it be the public education campaign or people, wanting to have return to some form of normalcy or not to be excluded out of certain things, there's a willingness of a volume enough to take this. The manufacturing of this and the distribution so that it's available to take for all populations, when are you hearing? Do we think by summer everybody in this country will have had a chance to take the vaccine if they want?
Well, there are a lot of variables that go into answering that question. If, for example, we only have Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine, then we're totally dependent on one company with its factories to produce all the vaccines we need. But it's important to remember that in addition to Pfizer and Moderna, these two vaccines that are probably going to get approved soon, there are a bunch coming through the pipeline. Johnson & Johnson has phase 3 trials, which will probably be done by January or February. Sanofi is getting involved. They will have phase 3 trials done fairly soon. So you're going to see through the spring, I would imagine, more and more companies supplying more and more volume. And each company will be ramping up their own production. So there's reason to be optimistic that by the summer that, yes, everyone who wants a vaccine, needs a vaccine, will get a vaccine.
And so far it looks pretty good. We just got to get there. But Carl, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And up next, we are less than a month away from the Georgia runoffs that are going to decide who controls the Senate. I don't have to tell you how critical these two races are. After the break, we'll check in on both of the races and also show you what Trump supporters had to say at a rally that we attended on Saturday.